the name that shattered his sleep. His mistress was sleeping beside him when the sound of the television cut through the silence like a blade. The suite was dark, wrapped in the quiet luxury that only money could buy. Silk sheets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that never questioned his power. The woman beside him breathed softly, her arm draped across his chest as if she owned him. She smiled even in her sleep, safe in the illusion that she had won. He was awake. Daniel Crawford had learned long ago that sleep was for people without enemies. Millionaires slept lightly. Men who had climbed over bodies to reach the top never truly rested. Even now, his mind moved constantly, calculating, planning, controlling. The television had been left on mute earlier, just background noise to drown out thoughts he didn't want to face. But somehow during the night the volume rose. "Breaking news tonight," the anchor said. Daniel frowned, irritation flashing across his face. He reached for the remote, ready to shut it off, until he heard the name. Elena Crawford. His body went rigid. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. Or hallucinating. Or being punished by a mind that refused to forget the past. But the anchor repeated it. Elena Crawford, the internationally recognized humanitarian and CEO of the Phoenix Trust, addressed the United Nations earlier today. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel sat up so fast the woman beside him stirred, mumbling his name, trying to pull him back down. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on the screen. There she was, standing behind a podium bathed in light. Calm, composed, powerful. Elena. His wife. The woman he had abandoned. The woman he had humiliated. The woman he had erased from his life as if she were nothing. She wore a simple navy suit, no excessive jewelry, no need to prove anything. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her posture unshakable. Cameras flashed as world leaders listened in silence. "This initiative isn't about charity," Elena said on screen, her voice steady and unmistakable. "It's about justice. About restoring dignity to people who have been told their entire lives that they are invisible." Daniel's heart slammed violently against his ribs. That voice. He remembered it begging once. Shaking. Breaking. Now it commanded rooms full of power. The anchor continued, unaware that a man's carefully constructed reality was collapsing in real time. Once known only as the estranged wife of real estate mogul Daniel Crawford, Elena Crawford has independently built one of the most influential global foundations in the last decade. The words hit like gunshots. Estranged wife. Independently built. Most influential. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. The mistress finally sat up, confused, annoyed. "Daniel? What is this?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the woman the world was praising was the same woman he once told to leave his house with nothing but a suitcase and her pride. 10 years earlier, Elena Crawford had stood barefoot on marble floors that never felt like home. She had married Daniel young. Too young, people said. A waitress marrying a rising millionaire, it made headlines, whispers, judgments. Everyone assumed she was lucky. No one asked what it cost her. Daniel had loved her once. Or at least he thought he had. But love to him was possession. Control. Silence. When business grew, patience shrank. When power came, kindness disappeared. Elena had watched herself become smaller in that house. Her opinions dismissed. Her kindness mocked. Her background used as a weapon. "You don't belong in my world," he would say casually, never raising his voice. "Be grateful you're here." The final blow came the night he accused her of something she hadn't done. He didn't ask. Didn't listen. Didn't care. He just decided. And decisions were his specialty. "Pack your things," he told her coldly. "I won't be made a fool of." She cried that night. Not because she was guilty, but because she knew something worse. He would never believe her. She left before dawn. No money. No connections. No name. Just humiliation and a silence that followed her like a shadow. Daniel replaced her quickly. Younger. Louder. More decorative. The world applauded. And Elena disappeared. Back in the present, the mistress crossed her arms, staring at the screen with visible discomfort. "That's your wife?" she asked, emphasizing the word. Daniel still didn't respond. Because something terrifying was dawning on him. Elena hadn't just survived without him. She had risen. Higher than he ever imagined. The screen showed clips now. Elena walking through refugee camps, meeting presidents, speaking with victims of exploitation. She listened more than she spoke. When she spoke, people leaned in. Her foundation has recovered over $2 billion in stolen assets, the anchor said. Much of it traced back to elite corporate fraud. Daniel's blood ran cold. recovered assets, corporate fraud. The camera cut to Elena again. There is no such thing as untouchable power, she said calmly. Only power that hasn't been challenged yet. Daniel felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Fear. Because suddenly this wasn't just a story of his past. This was a reckoning walking toward him in heels and quiet confidence. The mistress laughed awkwardly. Wow, guess she really upgraded, huh? That was when Daniel finally turned to her. His expression wasn't anger. It was panic. Turn it off, he snapped. She reached for the remote, confused by the edge in his voice. The screen went dark. But it was too late. The name echoed in his mind. Elena Crawford. The woman he thought he broke. The woman the world now bowed to. And deep down, beneath layers of ego and denial, Daniel realized something that made his chest ache. He had mistaken silence for weakness. And humility for insignificance. That night, Elena stood alone on a balcony overlooking a foreign city, the wind cool against her skin. She had felt it. That familiar tightening in her chest when the anchor had mentioned his name during the broadcast briefing earlier. Daniel Crawford. Her past. Her mistake. Her lesson. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy she had long reclaimed. But she hadn't forgotten. And she hadn't forgiven. Not yet. Inside, her phone buzzed with messages from world leaders, donors, journalists. She ignored them all. Because justice, she had learned, didn't need noise. It needed timing. And somewhere she knew, she felt it in her bones. Daniel Crawford was watching. The past he buried begins to dig back. Daniel Crawford did not go to work the next morning. For the first time in 20 years, the man who built an empire on discipline and routine sat alone in his penthouse, staring at a city that suddenly felt hostile. The skyline no longer looked like proof of his success. It looked like a witness stand. The name still echoed in his head. Elena Crawford. Every search engine, every financial network, every news outlet was filled with her face. Her foundation. Her speeches. Her influence. And every article carried the same quiet implication. She hadn't needed him. Worse. She had outgrown him. Daniel slammed his laptop shut and stood abruptly, pacing the room like a trapped animal. His mistress watched him from the couch, irritation sharpening her voice. You're acting like you've seen a ghost, she said. It's just your ex. Plenty of people reinvent themselves. Daniel stopped pacing and turned slowly. She didn't reinvent herself, he said flatly. She rebuilt herself. The difference mattered. And it terrified him. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Mark, he said when the call connected. I need everything on Elena Crawford. Everything. Financials, partners, donors, legal exposure. I want weaknesses. There was a pause on the other end. Daniel, you know who she works with now, right? I don't care, Daniel snapped. Everyone has a price. When the call ended, Daniel leaned against the glass wall, his reflection staring back at him. For the first time, the man in the mirror didn't look invincible. He looked exposed. Elena's day began at 5 in the morning. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because discipline had become her sanctuary. She ran before sunrise, the city still quiet, her breath steady, her thoughts clear. 10 years ago she had run from pain. Now she ran toward purpose. Her assistant met her in the lobby, tablet in hand. Your schedule has been updated. After the Geneva meeting, there's a private request. Elena raised an eyebrow. From whom? The assistant hesitated. From Crawford Holdings. Elena stopped walking. The name hung between them like a challenge. She felt no shock, no fear, just a calm certainty. It was inevitable, Elena said softly. Decline the meeting. The assistant nodded, relieved. But Elena knew something Daniel didn't. Declining a meeting didn't mean avoiding him. It meant controlling the moment they would meet. Back in the penthouse, Daniel's mistress grew restless. She scrolled through social media, watching clips of Elena speaking, the comments filled with admiration and praise. Words like brilliant, graceful, inspiring repeated over and over. And something ugly crept into her chest. Jealousy. You never told me she was like this, she said sharply. Daniel didn't respond. You said she was weak, she continued. That she couldn't survive without you. Daniel's jaw tightened. That was true then. Or that's what you needed to believe, she snapped. The silence that followed was loud. For the first time since she'd entered his life, the mistress realized something unsettling. She wasn't the prize. She was the placeholder. 3 days later, the first crack appeared. One of Daniel's overseas accounts was frozen pending investigation. No explanation. No warning. Then a second. Then a third. His legal team scrambled, phones ringing non-stop. "This doesn't make sense," his CFO said over speakerphone. "These audits came out of nowhere." Daniel sat perfectly still. He knew exactly where they came from. Elena hadn't attacked him directly. She had done something far worse. She had made him accountable. That evening, Elena stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her jacket before another speech. She looked composed, but inside memories stirred. Not of luxury. Of loneliness. Of nights crying silently so no one would accuse her of manipulation. Of learning that respect starts with self-respect. She didn't seek revenge. She sought balance. And balance always felt like punishment to those who had lived without consequences. Daniel watched the news again that night. Elena's face filled the screen once more. "Transparency is not cruelty," she said calmly. "It's fairness." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Because for the first time he understood the truth. She wasn't doing this to him. She was doing it without him. And that hurt more than any revenge ever could. When power is exposed, silence becomes a sentence. Daniel Crawford had always believed scandals happened to other people. They happened to careless executives, sloppy politicians, men who didn't know how to protect themselves. For decades, he had built layers of insulation around his empire: lawyers, shell companies, favors owed, secrets buried so deep even he sometimes forgot where they were hidden. But now those layers were being peeled back one by one. And the worst part was the precision. Nothing exploded all at once. There was no dramatic arrest, no screaming headlines on the first day. Instead, the damage came quietly, methodically, like a surgeon's blade. A banking partner withdrew support. A board member resigned for personal reasons. A longtime investor requested an internal audit. Each move was polite, professional, legal, unstoppable. Daniel sat in a boardroom surrounded by men who once nodded at his every word. Now they avoided his eyes. "We need to distance the company," one of them finally said, "until things stabilize." Daniel laughed once, short and sharp. "You don't distance yourself from leadership. I am this company." The man across the table swallowed. "That may no longer be how the public sees it." Public? The word tasted bitter. Because Daniel had never needed public approval before. Fear and influence had always been enough. Until Elena changed the rules. The press conference happened on a Thursday morning. Daniel didn't plan to watch it. He told himself it didn't matter. That this was temporary. That power always swung back to those who understood the game. But when his phone began vibrating nonstop, calls, messages, alerts, he knew. Something irreversible was happening. He turned on the television. Elena stood behind a podium again, but this time the room was different. Larger. Louder. The kind of place where history was recorded. Behind her, a screen lit up with numbers, documents, timelines. "This investigation began years ago," Elena said calmly. "Long before the public ever knew my name." Daniel felt his chest tighten. She continued, "We followed money trails that led through exploitation, housing fraud, and illegal displacement of vulnerable communities." The screen shifted. One of the highlighted corporations was his. Crawford Holdings. Daniel's breath hitched. "The goal was never exposure for the sake of humiliation," Elena said. "The goal was accountability." Accountability. The word echoed like a verdict. Daniel's phone rang. His lawyer. Again. He didn't answer. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the woman who once stood in his kitchen asking why he no longer looked at her. Now the world was looking at her. And listening. At home, the mistress watched the broadcast from the bedroom, her stomach sinking deeper with every sentence. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't drama. This was collapse. When Daniel finally walked in, she stood up, arms crossed, fear replacing arrogance. "You told me she was nothing," she said. "You said she was bitter. Broken." Daniel didn't respond. "You lied," she whispered. Daniel stopped, finally meeting her gaze. "No," he said quietly. "I believed it." That hurt more. Because belief meant choice. And she suddenly understood something Elena had learned years ago. Men like Daniel didn't destroy you by accident. They did it because they could. Elena returned to her hotel suite late that night. She closed the door, leaned against it, and finally let the weight settle. Not guilt. Relief. She thought of the woman she used to be, the one who apologized for existing, who mistook endurance for love. She thought of the day she decided to stop asking for permission to matter. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk." She didn't need to ask who it was from. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed a response. "No, we don't." She set the phone down and walked to the window. Below her, the city glowed. Somewhere in it, a man who once controlled her world was learning what it felt like to lose it. Daniel sat alone in the dark. The mistress had left hours earlier, packing in silence, refusing to look back. For the first time, the penthouse felt empty. No applause. No validation. No illusion. Just consequences. He replayed memories he had buried, Elena's quiet strength, her refusal to fight ugly, her insistence on dignity. He finally understood the truth that had cost him everything. She hadn't been weak. She had been patient. And patience, when paired with purpose, was more dangerous than rage. When respect comes along after it is already too late. This is a tough situation to be in. You are finally getting the respect you deserve from someone. It is just not the same because it has taken them so long to give it to you. Respect is something that should be given to people when they need it and deserve it, not after a long time has passed. When respect arrives late, it can be hard to accept, and it can make you feel like you are not really being respected at all. Respect that comes late is not really respect, it is just someone trying to make themselves feel better. When respect arrives late, it can be a really frustrating and sad thing to deal with. Daniel Crawford was standing in the courtroom. He was all by himself. The courtroom was a room with a lot of empty seats. Daniel Crawford was the person standing there. He was not alone in the sense. There were lawyers and journalists and people watching him. But in every way that really counted, he was completely by himself. The men who used to stand with him, who used to laugh at his jokes and say things about his ideas, were no longer there. Now he had distance from the people he knew, of the loyalty they used to show him. Now there was silence, of the fear that people used to have of him. Elena Crawford walked into the room. Nobody really noticed her. She just came in. That was it. The room was quiet. Elena Crawford was now standing there. No dramatic pause. No glance in his direction. She does not need one. She walked with a certainty. This is the kind of certainty that comes from knowing you have already won. She did not need the law to be on her side to feel this way. The reason she felt like this is because she no longer needed someone to tell her that she is worth something. The man who once said she was not good enough could not hurt her feelings anymore. She was past that. The woman who was once denied her worth by this man is now walking with her head held. She is walking with the certainty of someone who knows her own worth. Daniel felt it at that moment. Not anger. Not hatred. Regret. The kind of change that really settles and it goes deep. It is slow. It is permanent. This kind of change settles deep. It does so in a manner, and the effects of this kind of change are permanent. The judge spoke to the people in the courtroom. The lawyers argued about the case. They presented a lot of documents to the judge. The documents were very important to the case that the lawyers were talking about. Daniel did not really listen to what was being said. He was not paying attention to it. Daniel was else in his mind. The woman he had told to leave his life was now standing in the room. He felt really small. He could not look away from the woman. The woman was standing tall. That made him feel bad. He had once ordered the woman out of his life. Now the woman was back. He felt small in the room. The ruling was decisive. Heavy fines. Public restitution. Mandatory divestment. His name, once synonymous with power, now permanently attached to exploitation and misconduct. The press really went crazy outside. Cameras were flashing everywhere. Many questions were being asked at the same time. The press was asking a lot of questions. Daniel did not answer in one of the questions. Daniel just stayed quiet. Did not say anything. The questions were left unanswered by Daniel. The man walked out of the courthouse quietly. His shoulders were lowered. The empire was officially finished. The empire was really now. The man had lost the empire. No handcuffs. No dramatic arrest. Just something far worse. Irrelevance. Elena did not stay for the chaos that was happening. Elena wanted to get out of there before things got really bad. The situation with Elena and the chaos was pretty intense. Elena just did not want to be around all that chaos. She walked out of a side door. Took a big breath of air. It was the time she had felt okay in days. The fight was finally over. It was not because she had hurt him really badly. It was because she had stopped thinking about him all the time. She had stopped carrying the weight of him with her. That evening she stood in front of a small group of people at a community center that her foundation paid for. There were no cameras around. There was no clapping from the people who were there to see her. Just people. There are men and women who have been ignored for a time. Then there are families who have been forced to leave their homes. The voices of these families and men and women have never been heard before. Women like these need to be listened to. Families who have been displaced need help and support. The voices of men and women and families who have been ignored need to be heard. Elena said this in a voice. She told them that this is not about getting at people. This is about making things right. This is about restoration. Elena also said that justice is not about being loud. Justice is about things changing for good. That change lasting a long time. Justice is lasting, Elena said. The people listened. The woman knew what the people were going through. That is why she understood them. She really understood them. Because she had been them. Weeks later, Daniel sat in a modest apartment watching the news on a smaller screen. A feature played on Elena's latest initiative, Housing, Education, Second Chances. The anchor smiled. Once silenced, Elena Crawford has become one of the most respected figures in global reform. Daniel turned the television off. Not in anger. In acceptance. He finally understood the lesson life had been trying to teach him for years. Power without respect is temporary. Love without humility is hollow. And the people you underestimate are often the ones who will one day define your legacy. Elena stood in her new office, sunlight flooding the room. She looked peaceful. Not victorious. Free. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another attempt. She deleted it without reading. Some conversations don't deserve closure. Because closure comes when you no longer need an apology.